So now
So
to our non-Marilyn movie of the week.
yeah, so I had you watch Out of the Past because you'd already seen Mildred Pierce, and it's another one of my favorite noirs, and Out of the Past is one of my favorite noirs, and I couldn't really remember it well enough, so I wanted to rewatch it. It is still I rewatched it as well as you watching it for the first time, and I still really like it. I think it's one of the better, especially noirs are a little different in the 40s from the 50s, and then as time goes on, we get neo noirs and stuff, but like this is one of the best, I think, 40s noirs, probably, at least, as I understand it. But you said you had a synopsis for this, so.
Okay, so the genuine synopsis for this is that Robert Mitchum plays a man living an unremarkable life, it seems, in Northern California, Central California, and his past catches up with him because he has kind of a dark history with a woman played by Jane Greer.
Yeah.
And he gets set up and kind of has to deal with the fallout from what has happened before.
Yeah.
Again, spoilers on this. I don't think we're going to talk about any other movies too much.
Probably not, but spoilers for sure on this.
Out of the Past. But I want to be ridiculous and reductionist in this film. Okay, so let me first say, I like this movie a lot, but the fact that I liked it kind of helped me understand why I have trouble with noirs. And first, I'm going to do this reductionist thing, which is that this movie is about a woman and a relationship with an abusive mobster who runs away from him and takes some of his money. This mobster then pays another man, I think, more than she actually stole in order to hunt her down.
Yes, I think that's a point in the way they discuss it.
She falls in love with the man who's hunted her down or something. I don't know. They have sex and a relationship. This man's friend is going to ruin it all. The man and the friend get into a fist fight that could easily lead to death, but she's the one who shoots the friend and therefore is like a murderer and runs away.
Yeah.
Eventually she ends up back with her abusive mobster boyfriend, and they try to she gets stuck trying to set up her ex-boyfriend now.
Yeah.
She sends someone to kill her ex-boyfriend, whose deaf helper murders a man with a fishing rod. And no one cares about this at all. He is not called a murderer. He is not shamed. Nothing comes of it. But she is the villainess of this story for having tried to defend herself. And the movie is unaware of this fact, and it ends on a shot of the deaf kid who is a murderer who got away with it, and no one cares. Because she's dead and Mitchum's dead. I was like, that kid just murdered him. And no one, like, the kid, and his character's name is the kid, like, no one, like, he murdered a man with a, like, and they didn't need to. They knew what was happening. He did not need to murder this man. There's a violent murderer in this movie, but no one cares because he's not. It also paints a weird picture of, like, how the people with, disabilities were viewed, because it's like, clearly he's not a threat because he's deaf, even though he just killed a man with a fishing rod.
So I have a couple points to make here, and I think your reading of it is hilarious, and it's entirely what my reading of it is too, ultimately. But one thing is, I think the way the movie tries to play off is that it's ultimately an accident that the guy is murdered by the fishing rod. It doesn't really work. Like, I think the idea is that he's like trying to just make it so that he doesn't shoot his friend, but accidentally.
Very little time spent in any way, shape, or form on what just happened. It's just kind of like, well.
Yeah. So I think you're correct. And here's the thing. You were talking about why you like these 50s movies because they get really weird and crazy. The reason I like noirs, and I figured it out with watching Out of the Past, is that, like, and specifically watching that next to the 7-Year Itch. In the 7-Year Itch, there's no affair because you want the characters to end up in a certain place, right?
Yeah.
When you make a noir, your characters get to do bad things. They have to die at the end because this is still the Hays Code, but you get to explore areas of humanity that are a little off, that are potentially more dark and potentially more salacious, let's say, at least for the 40s and 50s, than you can in a movie like The 7-Year Itch. which is a
Right.
part of why I like noirs. The other reason I like noirs is that the morality is still so old school and kind of like, I don't believe in any of the morality of these movies, but it's fascinating to me how the people of the era, who may or may not have believed it under this Hays Code, dealt with this morality. And because of this, I came to the reason, one of the reasons I like Out of the Past is because like Jane Greer is barely I mean, she's the villain of the movie, so to speak. She's the femme fatale. And like one of the reasons I like it is like in a modern reading of it, you really understand that she's not the villain, but this is the kind of shit she had to deal with as a woman. So there's a
Yeah.
weird streak to me in noirs where it's like unintentionally feminist. And I'm not going to say these are feminist movies, but like there's an unintentional, like you can read this in a kind of like, this movie was unintentionally showing how hard it was to be a woman in this era. So like
True.
there's a reading to these movies that I think is fascinating. Anyways.
No, I get that. What I'm going to say, though, why I realize I struggle a lot with these movies that is not very feminist is the ones that work for me, I get what's in it for her. I
Yeah.
have no idea why Jane Greer sleeps with Robert Mitchum. Is he like it almost seems like if his friend hadn't run into them, they would have been together until they like what is and I suspect it's supposed to be sexual. I suspect that but she's dressed like your 40s woman. She's wearing long sleeves. I mean, she's elegant and sexy as all get out. But what works for me better are like the 90s erotic thrillers. Like that's when that kind of because those were genuinely sleazy and kind of gross and weird. When I'm watching these 40s movies, you're right. It's weird because it's like it should be sleazy. It should be a little gross, but everyone looks like they belong on the cover of a magazine.
Well, and so here's a thought I have to that, and a reason maybe noirs work more for me. Like, of course, our perception of these things changes with time, and like, women wear more or less clothing now than they might have 10 years ago, and then 10 years from that, and 10 years from that, right? And
Yeah.
like in advertising, women still are sexy, and they're used to sell like a Carl's Jr. burger or
Right.
something like that. And so, like to me, there's this like classic nature to something like Out of the Past where like that is what sexy is at the time, is this suit and this dress, and like
Yeah.
that might be what sleazy is. She's sleazy because she was with a mob boss and she likes money and she wants the good things in life, and that's sleazy
Maybe.
compared to a housewife who stays at home and takes care of the kids.
Except
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to tell you a movie that's even a few years earlier than Out of the Past where that works for me. Where and I think speaking of Billy Wilder, Double Indemnity.
Yeah.
It's clear that it's sex between them and that's all that it is. And you know
Yeah.
exactly why she's using him and how she's using him.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Double Indemnity is one of the most
Double
famous
Indemnity, I
noirs.
probably like more than Out
Whereas
of the
in
Past, but I don't know.
Out of the Past, I'm like, I have no idea why she can. I don't know why she sticks with him. I get why she'd stay with the mobster because he's abusive and she's terrified and she has no money. But I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, Robert Mitchum is a very good-looking man. He's got really broad shoulders. He's got that interesting
Yeah.
wide forehead.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm left being like, I guess it's sex. I don't know, but but at the
I
end she wants to run away with him again, and so as a woman, I'm just like, ow, like I feel like I'm watching an alien.
because
You
I
accuse me of liking movies with aliens in them, and yet to me, the ones where people are like struggling to socialize, like that
I
makes
think
sense. This where it's like you're
I
here
like
to
different.
take me back to my abusive boyfriend, let's smooch. I mean, unless she's doing it for protection.
Well, that's where like we like different kinds of aliens, of course. I think
Yeah,
that's what we've come down to on this
yeah,
subject of liking aliens. I
yeah,
think that's the thing to me. There's a lot more politics to relationships in noirs than there are in like the 7 Year Itch or Gentlemen Prefer Blondes or something. Like
right.
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, like it's about being attractive and finding a millionaire, and there's not
Yeah,
necessarily like there is a little bit more to it than that. It's not nothing, but like this is like, well, is she with him because of the protection? Is she with him because he's attractive? Is
yeah,
she just trying to find somebody who might, like, he's also skilled? Is she with him because he's kind of skilled and knows how to potentially take care of them in terms of
yeah,
being caught? He just happens to be unlucky in that one situation. So it's like there's I think you can go into it in that way that you can't necessarily with some of the lighter fare. Now, Double Indemnity is, I think you're right that Double
Yeah,
Indemnity
but
is better in terms of like how sleazy it
she's
presents
written
itself.
better in
Yeah,
Double.
but like I also think that, and part of what my these work for me more than you is like I don't find celebrities attractive. Like I understand that Marilyn Monroe is attractive. I think she's pretty, but I couldn't tell you she's more or less pretty than Florence Pugh, Saoirse Ronan, Jane Russell. Like
Yeah.
I don't have a thing like that. The same with the men. So when you're saying like you don't see the romance like necessarily like when I'm watching it and I'm like, well, they find each other attractive. I just believe that because I don't find celebrities attractive. Like
Yeah.
in Gentlemen Prefer Blonde, I kind of understand that like maybe he's not as attractive because he wears glasses and he doesn't necessarily have a perfectly, whatever that whole thing about your face matching, like, but I still think, well, she's still attracted to him for some reason. So
Right.
like it doesn't, so that's maybe a different just on like a
Well, but
literal mental level for you and me.
right, but when I'm talking about and attractiveness, and I tried to say this and probably didn't say it very well. I'm talking about just being an interesting person, just having like a character and a personality. The men in those Marilyn Monroe movies don't. I mean, Marilyn's stupid blondes have more personality, except for 7 Year Itch, than the men really do, and more attractive personality. In this case, Out of the Past, both women, I don't really understand why they're with him because later he gets with this really sweet country girl, and it's like maybe because he's in. I mean, he is kind of interesting. He's got kind of, but it's really unclear to me. And there's plenty of movies with very shallowly written bad characters, and I'm usually not that interested in them. But also, this is like the focal point of the movie. So
Well, I think, and again, I think you've made your point well, and I think you've made more well point on top of your other point. I think my point still stands though, because like it's because it's still true in that like I think she just finds him attractive because he's a little the Virginia Houston character, I think is who it is.
the
Like
the the
the
sweet good
country,
girl,
the small town
yeah.
girl, like he's kind of mysterious and he's from the big city and like that's attractive potentially to somebody who's a small town girl, and like isn't really interested in like the other characters there. And so
Hmm.
like maybe I'm inventing something that isn't necessarily in the writing. And I think again, that might be
Yeah.
that might help my appreciation of these noirs, but like I tend to find attraction to another person so mystifying anyways in my own personal life
Hmm.
that like it doesn't bother me that like there isn't necessarily a well written out attraction between the characters. So I guess what I'm saying is like I probably like these movies more because I don't necessarily understand. I have more of a confusion on a personal level with attraction than maybe you do. So like the fact that it's not written super well in these characters all the time, depending on the noir, of course. Like I think you get maybe more of it in again Double Indemnity and other places. Like
Yeah.
it works better for you because it's written better. And for me, I think I kind of understand it on a level that works for me
Yeah.
because ultimately with a noir, and another reason I think I like them is that like again these you get your main character gets to be an anti-hero or a bad guy, and they don't really get to do that in a movie where the characters have a happy ending, and so
Hmm.
it has to kind of be a noir, and I like it for that reason. And because of that, there's more sex to it sometimes
Yeah.
than another movie, and there's more of an undercurrent of like who's good or bad, and
Right.
like the morality is still completely old fashioned and I don't believe it in
Right.
it at all, but like it's interesting again to see how they grapple with like that in the Hays Code. Anyways.
No, and I appreciate that reading of it, and I'll try and look at Noir. I still don't think I'd do that with that Orson Welles one you made me watch, which
That's
was
okay.
fine. It just I don't I yeah, anyway. Um,
It's okay.
but I mean, we know I like romantic movies. I like knowing why people are drawn to each other, why they have relationships, and
Yeah.
certainly for some genres, it's more important than others. I mean,
Yeah.
like in the horror genre, like I'm a little, like if people end up together, it's usually because monsters after them, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Although usually my favorites are still about interpersonal dynamic. But if you're
Yeah.
gonna have a femme fatale, then like the fact that she murders people, like there has to be more than the fatale part. There has to be the femme part too. And
Yeah.
she's beautiful. I just wish it. I think it is why I like those '90s erotic thrillers more because it's just like it's just about sex. It's just about how people
Yeah.
can be, and that's not a personal thing I experience. Like I
Maybe a
am
part
not
of
that
it.
drawn to people sexually, but
Maybe
I'm
a part of all.
fascinated by seeing it.
I think another reason noirs are interesting to me is like a part of it's like it's all this lie. Like
Yeah.
a part of, and I like the erotic thrillers and stuff that you're talking about. I don't know them as well as you do, and I don't tend to like them, I guess, as much as more as maybe on an average. I don't know. I haven't watched enough of them, but it's like those are more like to the point. And I like noirs because it's all this lie.
Yeah.
Like there's all this interesting sort of, again, this is the era where like I'm sure people were interested in sex then like they are now, but you couldn't really talk about it.
Right.
So like it's all a lie and it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
So like that's kind of fascinating
I like how you
to me.
related that to my own fascination with the way the 50s and 60s did it. I think the 50s and 60s doing it fascinates me more because it tends to be in Technicolor and with singing.
No,
I still remember your reaction to West Side Story, where you're like, I don't know what I just saw. I mean, it's a movie about gang members murdering each other and racism, and everybody singing and dancing.
Yes,
like
which,
if you really look at that movie from a distance, that's what we're watching.
That's what it is.
And that's not really a fair critique of it, but yet it's an entertaining way of looking at it.
Totally. I do have a question. So ultimately, you liked this movie. It sounds like.
I did. I think it really, Robert Mitchum's acting. I think he's an interesting guy. I did like that there was a deaf character that turned out to be a murderer and no one cared.
Well, he's like the ultimate innocent somehow in this movie, which is such
killing a person with like,
yeah.
And it's like that could need some therapy, I guess.
Yeah.
I like that it moved, because we watched that Humphrey Bogart one that was just so boring, and so like,
oh yeah,
this one, like, he's in Tahoe, he's in Los Angeles, he's in San Francisco, they go down to South America or Central America. Like, I like the pacing and the movement of it. I thought it was more entertaining to me than some of the other. And there are noirs I like. I keep thinking, I think I mentioned it last time, the one that had that funny music and was just really weird. I keep forgetting the name of it. Where the assassin.
The contract.
Murder
by contract.
Murder by contract. Like that one I like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I know you like noirs, but
it's beautiful looking, and I did finally. It was good enough for me to get a hand. It was good enough, but not so good that I was able to get a handle on what it was that didn't work for me. Whereas something like Double Indemnity is just really good, and at that point, it's like, I don't know why other ones don't work.
More than Double Indemnity, this might be a bit more standard late 40s noir, and I say that as somebody who doesn't fully understand the history of these things, but it feels like, well, like Asphalt Jungle kind of is just a noir heist movie, and like I enjoyed it more than you.
I don't like heist movies.
And like,
so that's a problem.
Yeah, like you enjoyed it okay, but it wasn't really your thing, and I enjoyed the Asphalt Jungle as like
bored out of my mind for a lot of it. So
yeah,
I tend to like the noirs either that have something quirky and interesting, like Murder by Contract, or that where the women characters. Like I was thinking about Detour. Like there's an interesting woman character in that. Like she's more than just here to screw up his life.
Yes.
And Out of the Past, she's mostly there to just screw up his life. But there was enough kind of going on.
To me, this might be the most like Asphalt Jungle or something, although that's a heist movie also. Like this is the most sort of standard noir, but Double Indemnity is just different enough that I guess maybe it's still in that category, but like Murder by Contract is not a standard noir.
Right.
And you like it.
You're saying the Sniper of the Past is like the best generic noir.
Yeah.
Double Indemnity is something kind of exceptional.
It's exceptional, and it may also be different enough anyways that it's not exactly a generic noir. Like it may be just different enough, because like Murder by Contract and The Sniper are both noirs, but they're different enough that they're kind of in a separate category. If we think of it that way.
Because I was thinking about The Sniper and how much effort they made to make you understand his psychology. Yeah. And like, there's no effort to understand Jane Greer's character's psychology. Kathy, who's her character, psychology, and it's like, well, she's just a murderer, and it's like you're all murderers and gangsters, and like, there's no one innocent in this movie except that one Virginia Houston's character. Anyway.
Yeah.
I did like it. I liked it. It was
it's still one of the ones one of my favorites. So of the noirs from this era.